Are you forgetting what truly matters? Have you ever felt that your mind is increasingly full, yet remembers less and less of what truly matters? In today's hyper-connected world, our attention spans are constantly fragmented by notifications, emails, social media updates, and an endless stream of information competing for our focus. This cognitive overload doesn't just distract us temporarily, it fundamentally alters how our memory functions and what we prioritize in our consciousness. The ancient Stoics recognized this problem millennia before smartphones existed. They understood that a scattered mind inevitably loses grip on essential truths. To them, memory wasn't merely a cognitive ability, but a profound moral faculty, the mechanism through which we maintain connection with wisdom, virtue, and purpose amid life's distractions. The Stoic philosophers viewed memory as a crucial tool of reason. While modern society often obsesses over memorizing facts or storing information externally, Stoicism offers a radically different perspective. We should cultivate the capacity to remember what strengthens the soul and guides right action. This isn't about achieving perfect recall or memorizing vast quantities of data. Rather, it concerns developing an intentional relationship with our memory, one that prioritizes what truly matters for living well. In Stoic psychology, memory serves as the foundation for moral consistency. When we forget our principles in moments of pressure or pleasure, we behave inconsistently and suffer the consequences. Epictetus frequently addressed this phenomenon, noting how easily people abandon their philosophical commitments when faced with temptation or adversity. The problem, he observed, isn't a lack of knowledge, but a failure of active remembrance. We know what we ought to do, but forget it precisely when this knowledge is most needed. This forgetting occurs partly because our brains prioritize novel information over familiar wisdom. Neurological research confirms what the Stoics intuited. Without deliberate reinforcement, even our most cherished values fade from working memory when competing stimuli appear. Furthermore, emotional states dramatically affect what we remember. When anxious, angry, or fearful, we tend to forget the very principles that could help us navigate these emotions wisely. Modern life intensifies these natural memory challenges. Our digital devices function as attention merchants, constantly trading our focus for commercial gain. Each notification triggers dopamine pathways that reward distraction rather than sustained attention. The result is a mind trained to jump between inputs rather than maintain connection with deeper truths. We become proficient at processing superficial information while forgetting fundamental principles. This memory crisis manifests in several ways. We forget our most cherished values when making decisions, inconsistently applying principles we claim to hold dear. We absorb vast quantities of information without integrating it into meaningful knowledge frameworks. We remember trivia and forget wisdom. Perhaps most concerning, we forget to remember, losing awareness that active recall of principles is necessary for living well. The Stoics would view this not merely as a cognitive issue but as a spiritual one. For them, forgetting what matters reflected a disorder of the soul, a misalignment between what we claim to value and what we actually hold in consciousness. The remedy begins with recognizing this disorder and implementing disciplined practices that strengthen memory's moral dimension. The first Stoic habit for unbreakable memory involves cultivating internal silence. Epictetus emphasized that a quiet mind forms the necessary foundation for meaningful remembrance. In a perpetually noisy environment, whether external or internal, the essential becomes indistinguishable from the trivial. Our cognitive resources become depleted by processing constant input, leaving little energy for maintaining awareness of what truly matters. Practicing internal silence doesn't require monastic isolation. Rather, it involves creating deliberate spaces in your daily life where thoughts can settle and clarity can emerge. Begin with just 5 minutes of complete silence each morning. During this time, avoid planning, problem-solving, or entertainment. Simply allow your mind to become still enough to remember what matters most. Without this practice, we remain trapped in reactive patterns, constantly responding to the newest stimulus rather than acting from our deepest values. As you develop this habit, you'll notice that silence doesn't empty the mind, but rather creates space for essential memories to surface. Thoughts that were previously drowned out by mental noise, insights about your purpose, principles, or priorities become accessible again. This silence serves as a mnemonic gateway, allowing forgotten wisdom to re-enter conscious awareness. Implementing this practice requires confronting our cultural addiction to constant stimulation. Many people feel profoundly uncomfortable with silence, rushing to fill any quiet moment with input. Recognize this discomfort as a symptom of memory dysfunction. Your mind has forgotten how to remember naturally and now depends on external prompts. By gradually increasing your tolerance for silence, you restore the brain's native capacity for meaningful recall. The second Stoic habit involves intentional note-taking. Writing serves not primarily as external storage, but as a method for internalizing wisdom. The act of recording thoughts requires discernment, deciding what deserves preservation and what can be released. This discrimination trains memory to prioritize effectively. Unlike modern approaches that encourage capturing everything, Stoic note-taking focuses on quality over quantity. Record only what genuinely deserves remembrance, insights that clarify values, strengthen resolve, or illuminate truth. The goal isn't to outsource memory, but to refine it through deliberate selection. Intentional note-taking involves carefully selecting what truly deserves remembrance and writing in a way that embeds it in memory rather than replacing it. Begin by keeping a small notebook or digital equivalent specifically for recording essential insights. When you encounter something truly worth remembering, whether from reading, conversation, or personal reflection, record it concisely, but don't stop there. Take a moment to consider why this particular insight deserves remembrance. What value does it serve? How might it guide future actions? This reflective step transforms passive recording into active memory formation. The format matters less than the intention. Some prefer handwritten notes because the physical act of writing enhances neural encoding. Others benefit from digital systems that facilitate regular review. Experiment to discover what works best for you, but maintain the core Stoic principle. Notes should serve as catalysts for internal remembrance rather than substitutes for it. These two foundational practices, cultivating internal silence and intentional note-taking, establish the conditions for deeper memory transformation. Without them, later habits become merely technical exercises rather than pathways to genuine philosophical remembrance. The silence creates space for essential memories to emerge, while intentional writing reinforces their accessibility and application. As you implement these practices, you'll begin noticing subtle shifts in what your mind naturally remembers and forgets. The barrage of trivial information that previously occupied your consciousness gradually gives way to awareness of enduring principles. Moments of decision become increasingly informed by remembered wisdom rather than momentary impulse. These changes reflect not improved memorization techniques, but a fundamental reorientation of memory toward what truly matters. The Stoics recognize that memory serves not merely personal effectiveness, but ethical development. By remembering our principles in challenging moments, we maintain integrity and avoid regret. The practices described above lay the groundwork for this moral dimension of memory. They prepare the mind to hold fast to wisdom precisely when external circumstances most strongly pull us toward forgetting. What is your mind unnecessarily storing? Is your mind retaining what genuinely helps you live better, or has it become cluttered with information that adds no value to your existence? This question strikes at the heart of Stoic memory practice. The ancient Stoics understood that mental capacity is finite. Every trivial fact or useless worry stored in memory occupies space that could otherwise hold wisdom, virtue, or insight. Most people never consciously choose what occupies their memory. Instead, they allow recency, emotionality, or mere repetition to determine what mental content persists. This passive approach to memory leads to predictable dysfunction. We remember advertising jingles, but forget our deepest values. We retain workplace gossip but lose touch with philosophical insights. We hold grudges with perfect clarity while the lessons of history fade. Without deliberate intervention, our memory naturally prioritizes the immediate over the important, the novel over the enduring, and the emotional over the essential. The third Stoic habit for unbreakable memory addresses this problem directly. Eliminate the superfluous, retain the essential. Marcus Aurelius exemplified this practice in his personal writings, now known as meditations. These were not intended as literary works, but as memory aids, deliberate attempts to reinforcement what truly mattered amid the endless distractions of imperial life. By regularly examining your thoughts, you begin to identify and discard everything that doesn't serve wisdom or virtue. You notice how easily the mind becomes cluttered with fears about the future, resentment from the past, harsh judgments of others, and constant concern for your image. By clearing out this mental noise, you make space to remember what truly matters. This practice begins with regular mental inventory. Set aside time each evening to reflect on what your mind has accumulated during the day. Which thoughts, ideas, or impressions deserve preservation? Which should be released? This discernment isn't based on what feels pleasant or unpleasant, but on what serves your highest values and deepest understanding. As you practice this inventory, you'll discover recurring patterns of unnecessary retention. Perhaps you habitually replay social interactions, analyzing what others thought of you. Maybe you store detailed memories of minor irritations or inconveniences. You might retain elaborate scenarios about potential future problems that rarely materialize. Whatever your patterns, recognizing them represents the first step towards selective forgetting. Stoicism offers specific criteria for determining what deserves remembrance. First, focus on what lies within your control, rather than external circumstances. Memory spent on unchangeable events or others' actions represents wasted cognitive resources. Second, prioritize principles over particulars. Remember the underlying value rather than every specific application. Third, retain what serves virtue, courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom, while releasing what undermines these qualities. The Stoics developed various techniques for actively releasing unhelpful mental content. One approach involves reframing, transforming how we remember challenging experiences to extract their value while discarding their emotional residue. Rather than remembering an insult with resentment, for instance, we might reframe it as a valuable opportunity to practice equanimity. This doesn't deny the experience, but reshapes its place in memory. Another technique involves deliberate perspective shifting. When we find ourselves ruminating on trivial concerns, we can consciously remember the vastness of cosmic time and space, reducing our preoccupations to their proper insignificance. Marcus Aurelius frequently employed this approach, contemplating how briefly any human concern persists against the backdrop of eternity. Some mental content proves particularly resistant to release. Deep emotional wounds, traumatic experiences, or long-established thought patterns may require more sustained attention. The Stoics acknowledged this reality while maintaining that even the most stubborn mental content could be transformed through persistent practice. They recommended gradual exposure to difficult memories while maintaining philosophical perspective, slowly changing their emotional valence. As you develop this habit of eliminating the superfluous, you'll notice increased mental clarity and emotional resilience. Thoughts that previously consumed hours of attention, worries about others' opinions, replays of past mistakes, anticipations of future problems, gradually occupy less mental space. This cleared capacity becomes available for remembering what genuinely matters for living well. The fourth Stoic habit builds upon this foundation. Learn something new every day. While this might initially seem contradictory to eliminating mental clutter, the Stoics understood that strategic learning actually enhances memory function rather than overloading it. This happens because new learning creates neural connections that strengthen existing knowledge frameworks, making all memories more accessible. Stoic philosophers valued continuous learning as essential for moral development. They recognized that cognitive stagnation leads to ethical stagnation. Without new insights, We simply repeat established patterns rather than growing in wisdom. By contrast, regular exposure to new ideas challenges assumptions, reveals blind spots, and expands perspective. This practice doesn't require formal education or extensive study. Rather, it involves cultivating what psychologists call beginner's mind, approaching daily experience with curiosity and openness. Each interaction, conversation, or observation contains potential wisdom if we remain attentive. The key lies not in accumulating information, but in extracting meaningful principles from experience. Implement this habit by dedicating at least 30 minutes daily to active learning. This might involve reading philosophical texts, engaging in thoughtful conversation, observing nature, or reflecting on personal experience. The specific content matters less than the quality of attention you bring to it. Approach each learning opportunity with the question, what principle here deserves remembrance? Modern neuroscience confirms the cognitive benefits of this practice. Novel learning experiences trigger the release of neurochemicals that enhance memory formation and recall. By regularly stimulating these pathways, you maintain cognitive flexibility and memory function throughout life. This represents another area where Stoic intuition anticipated contemporary scientific understanding. The combination of eliminating mental clutter and engaging in regular learning creates optimal conditions for memory development. The first practice creates space. The second fills that space with content worth remembering. Together, they transform memory from passive storage to active wisdom cultivation. As you implement these two habits, you'll notice that learning becomes more efficient and retention improves. This happens because information no longer competes with mental noise for limited attention. When the superfluous has been eliminated, the essential registers more clearly and integrates more effectively into existing knowledge structures. You'll also discover increased discernment regarding what deserves learning. Many educational opportunities available today offer information without wisdom, facts without principles, data without discernment. The practice Stoic develops sensitivity to this distinction, investing mental resources only in learning that genuinely contributes to living well. This approach diverges sharply from contemporary emphasis on information abundance. Modern education and media often encourage maximum information consumption without corresponding attention to retention or application. The result is cognitive overload without wisdom, precisely what Stoic practice aims to prevent. The habit of daily learning requires patience and consistency. Some days will yield profound insights worthy of lifelong remembrance. Others might offer more subtle lessons. The Stoic approach values both, recognizing that wisdom accumulates gradually through sustained attention rather than arriving in dramatic revelations. As you cultivate these middle two habits, eliminating the superfluous and learning something new daily, you establish a dynamic memory practice that simultaneously clears and replenishes mental content. This balanced approach prevents both cognitive stagnation and information overload, creating optimal conditions for remembering what truly matters. Are you building a memory or merely storing noise? Memory is not a vault, but a garden. Everything you plant and water grows. The rest withers or becomes weeds. This metaphor captures the Stoic understanding of memory as a living system requiring continuous cultivation rather than a static repository of information. Like a garden, memory reflects the attention we give it, flourishing in areas we nurture and declining where we neglect. This gardening approach to memory stands in stark contrast to modern storage metaphors. We speak of information storage and memory banks, as though remembering were merely a matter of depositing and withdrawing data. Such metaphors obscure the active, selective nature of memory formation and maintenance. The Stoics understood what neuroscience now confirms. Memory is not passive recording but active construction shaped by attention, emotion, and repetition. The fifth Stoic habit for unbreakable memory directly addresses this constructive nature. Reinforce with meaningful repetition. The ancient Stoics recognized repetition as essential for mental strengthening, not mindless drilling but thoughtful revisiting of core principles. Through deliberate repetition, We transform intellectual understanding into embodied wisdom, accessible even during challenging circumstances. This practice involves regularly returning to foundational insights rather than constantly seeking novelty. Modern culture often devalues repetition, equating it with staleness or lack of creativity. The Stoics understood otherwise. They recognized that certain truths require repeated contemplation, precisely because their implications are inexhaustibly rich and their application constantly challenged by changing circumstances. Implement this habit by establishing 2 fixed daily moments for reflection, upon waking and before sleeping. During these times, revisit the principles and insights most essential to living well. This doesn't require extensive review. Even brief contemplation of core truths strengthens their presence in memory and their influence on behavior. Morning reflection prepares the mind for upcoming challenges by activating relevant principles before they're needed. Evening review consolidates learning from the day's experiences. Together, these bookend practices ensure that wisdom remains accessible rather than being displaced by circumstantial concerns. The content of these reflections should evolve as your understanding deepens. Begin with simple principles, perhaps the Stoic dichotomy of control or the value of equanimity. Over time, incorporate more nuanced insights drawn from personal experience and philosophical study. The specific principles matter less than the habit of returning to fundamental truths amid life's complexity. This practice applies equally to practical and theoretical knowledge. Whether you're reinforcing professional skills, ethical principles, or personal insights, meaningful repetition transforms superficial familiarity into deep understanding. The key lies in approaching each repetition with fresh attention rather than habitual recognition, asking what new dimensions of the familiar might reveal themselves today. Information reviewed at strategic intervals becomes increasingly integrated into memory structures and resistant to forgetting. The Stoics anticipated this insight, scheduling regular reviews of philosophical principles to maintain their accessibility during challenging circumstances. As you develop this habit, you'll notice that principles revisited regularly become increasingly available in daily life. Wisdom that previously required deliberate recall gradually becomes part of your default perspective. This represents the transition from intellectual understanding to embodied knowledge, the ultimate goal of Stoic memory practice. The 5 habits together form a complete system for memory cultivation. Cultivate internal silence to create space for remembering what matters. Take notes with intention rather than anxiety. Eliminate the superfluous to retain the essential. Learn something new each day. Reinforce with meaningful repetition. Each habit addresses a distinct aspect of memory function, yet all work together synergistically. Silence creates the conditions for discernment. Intentional note-taking develops discrimination. Eliminating the superfluous creates mental space. Learning something new expands understanding. Meaningful repetition integrates wisdom into everyday consciousness. This systematic approach transforms memory from passive recording to active cultivation. Rather than being overwhelmed by information overload, you develop the capacity to remember selectively and purposefully. Rather than forgetting principles in moments of pressure, you maintain access to wisdom precisely when it's most needed. The benefits extend beyond improved recall. As memory becomes more intentional, thinking gains clarity and decision-making improves. Actions align more consistently with stated values. The gap between knowledge and application narrows. These changes reflect the Stoic understanding that memory serves not merely intellectual but moral development. Remembering well enables living well. Implementing these practices requires overcoming several common obstacles. First, modern culture values information quantity over quality, creating constant pressure to absorb more rather than integrate deeply. Resist this pressure by remembering that wisdom comes from depth rather than breadth of knowledge. Second, digital technologies often function as memory prosthetics, creating the illusion that external storage eliminates the need for internal cultivation. While tools can support memory practice, they cannot replace the embodied knowing that comes from integrating wisdom into personal consciousness. Use technology selectively rather than dependently. Third, consistent practice requires overcoming initial discomfort. Silence may feel uncomfortable after years of constant stimulation. Discarding mental content may trigger fear of missing something important. Learning may reveal gaps in understanding. Repetition may seem boring compared to novelty. Persist through these discomforts, recognizing them as symptoms of memory dysfunction rather than valid objections. The Stoics themselves acknowledged these challenges. They understood human resistance to philosophical practice and the allure of cognitive shortcuts. Yet they maintained that genuine memory cultivation remains possible for anyone willing to undertake consistent effort. The obstacles themselves become opportunities for developing discipline and commitment. As these practices become habitual, you'll notice profound shifts in what you naturally remember and forget. Information that previously dominated consciousness, news cycles, social media content, workplace politics, gradually occupies less mental space. Principles and insights that previously required deliberate recall become increasingly accessible in daily life. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. Like physical fitness, memory development requires consistent practice over extended periods. Expect progress to come in subtle increments rather than dramatic breakthroughs. The Stoics valued gradual improvement precisely because it builds sustainable capacity rather than temporary performance. The ultimate measure of success lies not in perfect recall, but in memory alignment, remembering what truly matters in moments when it matters most. When principles remain accessible during challenging circumstances, when wisdom guides decisions under pressure, when virtue shapes behavior, even amid distraction, then memory serves its highest purpose. Is your mind genuinely working for you, or simply accumulating noise? Are you remembering what truly matters for living well, or merely storing whatever information happens to cross your awareness? These questions invite ongoing reflection as you implement the 5 Stoic habits for unbreakable memory. A clear mind remembers wisely. A cluttered mind forgets amid noise. The choice between these conditions lies not in cognitive capacity, but in memory cultivation practices. By implementing the Stoic system described above, you develop the ability to remember what truly matters amid life's endless distractions. Which of these practices will you apply today? Comment below which habit resonates most strongly with your current situation. Like and share this content with someone who needs this wisdom, and subscribe to continue remembering what truly matters.